to a shamanic experience. I'm Katie Weatherup, shamanic practitioner and solo traveler. If you believe mountains hold ancient wisdom and rivers cleanse, you're in the right place. Let's explore the energy and magic of places near and far, and I'll share practical travel tips along the way, one sacred location at a time. I visited Stonehenge a total of 4 times, which is a neat trick for someone living in the United States. And the first time was sort of the normal tourist experience of being outside the area that was roped off, so a good distance from the stones. And while that was, quite compelling and interesting, I was also a little bit disappointed. There were crowds and people talking, as there always are at these very popular kind of tourist sites. But I heard from someone, and it just totally lit up for me that there's an opportunity to go inside the center of the circle. And so I became very determined to make this happen for myself. And then after I had the experience, which was epically cool, I really wanted to take along friends. And so years ago, I went through a period of time where I was funding my international travel by taking groups with me. And it was an experience that I was so excited to share, of finding this obscure place on the internet. It's a lot easier to Google these days. And I'll put a link in the show notes in case you want to visit yourself. But I very much wanted to have other people have this experience. So the upshot was that I've had 3 different occasions of being inside the Stonehenge circle at dawn, wandering around and having this evocative, beautiful, amazing experience. And it's one of the kind of jewels of my life experience that I just smile when I think about it. It was so special to get to have that. And it's one of the times that energetic sensitivity really pays off. So I think that there are a lot of ways where energetic sensitivity is similar to the complexities of someone who's neurodivergent or dealing with some kind of cognitive processing issue that makes things go a little bit differently. And one of the things I notice about myself is my ability to identify a smell accurately seems to be a lot less than most people. Like if you waved an essential oil under my nose, there are probably only a few that I would recognize, even if they were really common sense. And I'm often 180 degrees off, like the complete opposite direction of trying to figure out which direction a noise is coming from. My brain has a really hard time with that. And my theory about that is that for me, energetic sensitivity is like an entirely additional sense. And it's always interesting to try to articulate this to someone who doesn't have this experiential relationship to their energetic psychic abilities. And I would argue that most people have a degree of psychic ability, but we don't talk about it or get trained in it or have it developed. And I believe that there are cultures where that is something that you're taught to pay attention to. Like, what are the energetics telling you? What is your inner voice and intuition telling you? What is your body telling you? There can be all of these cues of really valuable flow of information that we get trained to tune out. And humans do a lot of tuning out. It's completely appropriate that we do so. Anyone watching someone trying to get a toddler to the car who's distracted by the clouds and the leaves and the snails and absolutely everything, they haven't onboarded this filtering in their brain. And as a result, they are very, very distractible, compelled by all kinds of different things that are immediately in their environment. But what I believe about my childhood, being an incredibly energetically sensitive person in an environment where that was almost never talked about, we didn't have vocabulary for it. So as most children, I just kind of assumed that everyone was having this kind of inner world experience that I was having. It made social stuff really, really tough because being socially awkward and psychic enough to feel when people were having a negative reaction was a complicated conundrum, and I didn't know how to fix it. But in any case, this energetic sensitivity that is like another sense, I believe when I was trying to manage that as a child, it got in the way of some of the ways that I related as deeply to some of my secondary senses. And it's not such a big deal, but I think that it's worth recognizing that the expensive nature of moving through loud, chaotic environments, even when you learn really good shields. And that was a real game changer for me when I learned to filter and manage my energy, and I gained some tools. I wasn't so bombarded and overwhelmed because as a child, I was overstimulated to the point of being dissociative as a result of this sensitivity. So anyway, this is a much longer conversation. I've probably already digressed enough, but the payoff for how complicated airports and grocery stores can be and how many sort of extra things I need to do to have a really positive experience were totally worth it at the experience of being able to be inside of Stonehenge with all the wonder of a beautiful English dawn with mist rolling through and the huge stones that you're looking up at, plus this energetic opportunity to feel this really potent experience of the earth. And they kept the group small. I think there were 26 people total, and I had brought a number of them. And, there's a good bit of space among the stones to wander and walk and experience. So the absolute exquisite gift of this experience was that the background noise of people, the psychic loudness of people, wasn't so much a factor. I could have these experiences with lots and lots of personal space to be with the stones having an experience. And I got really lucky all 3 times that the group of people who were compelled by this experience also sort of had this response of the wonder and the sacredness. So they were sort of naturally inclined to be quiet and reverent and deep in the experience rather than, boisterous and silly. One of the places I aspire to is Egypt, and I've watched some videos of going inside the pyramid. And just listening to all the people joking and talking and being silly, I imagine that it would just really, really work my last nerve to have so much human stimulation and noise. I'll remember to pack earplugs if I have the opportunity to go and have that experience. But it's so powerful when you don't have to try to filter out the human noise to feel the land. And I wish I could tell you some, really meaningful thing about, what Stonehenge is. There's all this energy of gateways, and it sits on powerful ley lines and enormous amounts of human intent really amplifying that. And the nature of the stones themselves are really potent and cool. I went out to Wales, and there's the quarry that the stones come from, Stonehenge. And there is much debate as to whether our Neolithic ancestors, hopefully I'm using the term Neolithic correctly, but those long ago people dragged stones from Wales, floated them down rivers and such to get them to this place, or whether the glaciers scooped them up and carried them. And then they were like, hey, we have these really big, cool stones, and they shaped them. I don't really know the answer to that. I didn't ask the question energetically or from my guides. The nature of shamanic reality and messages is more about personal truth than objective truth. So I wouldn't necessarily take that as accurate information if the guides gave me a message that was for me. But in any case, hiking up the hill in Wales to those blue stones that have that composition was an incredibly potent, buzzy, wonderful spot. So we stacked together all of these things that are so, so cool. So all this amazing stone altar that was built out of rocks that in their just fundamental principle have a really unique and potent vibration, sitting on a piece of land with incredibly potent ley lines. And so there was an enormous amount of energy, and it felt amazing and multi-layered and multi-dimensional. And I totally get why those who sort of scry into the energy of Stonehenge have so many different takeaways, so many different ideas about what it was and what it meant. And one of the things that I think is really interesting when we're starting to kind of look at magical principles is there was certainly the ways that Stonehenge works with the planet. It's set up like a calendar. There are things that happen, at different times of the year. And I think when a physical thing is aligned to these really deep principles, that's one kind of magic. And there was whatever the intention was of the humans that were having their experience. But over the years of this sitting out, in this open spaciousness with the wind and the rain and the sun and the flow of energy, the intention of the original people, I think, is a layer that can be felt. But there's another layer that I think is the innate, potent power of these stones on these ley lines in this incredibly epic configuration in a place where people are available to get really quiet and go inside and see what wakes up for them. And so all of these things coming together and intersecting made for a really potent experience. And one of my favorite pictures, make sure you check out the YouTube channel if you feel called. I have a Shamanic Experience YouTube channel, and I'll share some of the images from that along with, perhaps a briefer version of my talking about the experience. But one of the favorite images of me is during a healing I was doing. So I mentioned part of, where I come from, why I'm sitting alone in a room talking into a microphone now, and why I took people with me and, used my, logistical ability. The one of the trips we were actually focused on Ireland, but I had us do this space of time so we could drop in England, have the Stonehenge experience, and then go on to the majority of the trip that was in Ireland, is this desire to share with people. And one of the things I really want to invite for you, especially with looking at the YouTube images and kind of connecting, is this opportunity to really experience the energy remotely. Because I think we have a really cool capacity to tune in. There have occasionally been places that I decided to go and I got there and I was like, don't really care for it. But I tend to be really compelled to go to really specific places and get there and then have it be more wonderful than my wildest dreams. So I believe that there's a strong capacity, even if it isn't in your budget, to travel to this kind of deserted area, a little bit deserted, of England and have this wonderful wander through the stones in the mist, as the sun is rising. Although, of course, if that's in your budget and available to you, I highly recommend it. But that opportunity to connect with the energy. And so if you're someone who does shamanic journey, you can listen to the drum, go into that altered state and journey there and have your own experience, which has the merits of getting something that's very attuned to you and you don't have to worry about the other people. It is a middle world journey for those of you who journey in that way. So you want to take your spirit guide allies and you want to proceed with just a measure of caution, because it's such a place that has so many layers of meaning. So this is a little bit of an intermediate journey, I would say, rather than a beginner journey, just because the location is in middle world. And so if that's gobbledygook to you, it's totally fine. If you've taken shamanic training, it'll probably make more sense. But there's also just the, inviting feeling and experiencing. And so going back to that picture, I know I'm coming around to it long way round. One of the offers I made to people when I was traveling there was that I would spend time in the center of Stonehenge and I would send them personally an energetic transmission. So people signed up and I went in, with this detailed list of all the people that had said they wanted to connect to that. I didn't even charge for it. I was just like, hey, if you want to do the thing, that would be great. At least as best I recall. I think maybe some people made some donations, but you see my tendency toward accuracy being so very important there. But in any case, I had this list, and as I was in the center of Stonehenge, I connected to the energy, and I was sending out this energetic transmission of connecting to each of these people and inviting whatever was right and good for them of this profound power spot to travel to them, to give them the opportunity to really receive this energy. And I had my eyes closed. I was just focused on what I was doing. And one of the people who was with me snapped a picture. So I have this picture of what my face looked like when I wasn't smiling for the camera, or posing for the camera, even aware of the camera, while connected to this kind of energy. And when I do the YouTube video, I'll share that with the intent that it be a vibration and an energy that helps bridge to you. So in connecting with this podcast, sometimes you may hear me stumble over my words a little bit. I have a marvelous editor and they do an epically good job of cleaning up my stumbling. But part of sort of how I'm speaking into this is I'm connected to the energy of the place, and I'm connected to the guides that helped me to get the most out of this experience. And then I'm speaking and my voice is carrying vibration. So you have this opportunity to listen to the layer of my words, to have a picture painted, to pull up your own YouTube playlist of someone who's way better at cinematography stuff than I am and watch the images while I talk. But there's also this level of the vibrational transmission that you're really invited to tune into. And I think it's a really good trick just in general to work with for energetically sensitive people, for picking the layer that you want to work with. And this is a really fun way to do it. So there's just this invitation as I talk about this experience that I love so much in whatever way feels right to you. And there are many ways to go in to just recognize that at the time I was there, I shared an energetic transmission, and my intent is to help make it available to have this anchor of this moment in time when I'm connected to very specific guides in a very specific place on the planet. And whenever you hear these words, because there's no time in shamanic reality, that they be available to share a feeling of this energy, a flavor of this energy that's right for you. I mean, I don't even think that my human mind is particularly capable of understanding all the majesty of Stonehenge. There are tons of books and documentaries on it, and everyone takes away different layers. I think it's so cool and interesting in what it shows us about ourselves, where people can look at something and their takeaway, the thing that they're moved by, the headline for them, can be so very different. So, if I were to take my father there, and he's not particularly attuned to energy, he is profoundly accepting and so supportive of the fact that I'm into all this weird woo-woo stuff, which I really appreciate. But it's totally not his jam. But he, is really interested in anthropology and archaeology. So if he had gone with me, he would have been at the visitors center, really delving into like, how did people live back in the day? How did they make this thing? And he would have a full, wonderful experience of his own, which is wonderful. So I have nothing against going through the museum. They've made an even cooler and more epic museum than the last time that I was there. And there's an enormous amount of other power sites, many of which haven't even been excavated that are available in the surrounding area, which is, really wonderful. You can walk over the land, because that's the cool thing about being energetically sensitive, is if you go out from the immediacy of Stonehenge, there are all of these ley lines and power spots and things that are not that far beneath the surface that carry this really potent energy that you're not going to have to fight crowds for. So if you do travel there, allowing some extra time, and because it's such a potent power site, it can be really useful to kind of space things out a little bit. And there's also just a lot of really cool stuff in the area that is also great. And when you get away from the huge bucket list thing of Stonehenge itself, and you move out very, very quickly, very potent sites or places where you could sit in the pasture with just the sheep for witnesses and have a really potent energetic experience of the land. So I highly recommend tuning into this, whether you do it remotely or in person or both. And it's just one of the really special and precious memories that I get to have. I can pull such a vivid picture in my mind, even though it's been years, of the light coming through as dawn arose and the mists moving through, and staring up, at these towering stones. You don't realize how big they are until, you take a picture standing in front of them, or you're looking up at them. And so it's just a really special experience. And I know that some of these tourist spots can feel, a little bit overblown. And I get that. I really do. And it's certainly for me challenging when there's a big crowd of humans having completely legitimate but very different experience, where they're laughing and joking and wrangling kids and and such. So I feel really fortunate that there was this similar approach each time I got to go into the center, that everyone sort of unconsciously ended up taking with, that had a lot of awe and reverence and this quietness. We were speaking in very, very hushed voices that really allowed me to drop in these deep ways. And so anyway, I hope that in whatever way it is appropriate for you to connect to Stonehenge, that becomes available to you. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.